The way you periodize your training can make or break your jump training results. And if you're periodizing your training incorrectly and not doing it in the way we're going to talk about in this podcast, well, you're not going to jump higher, bro. So let's jump into it. Tom, what is the best way to periodize your training if you want to jump like a freak, 48 inches like yourself, like Jordan, and just like our athletes that continuously gaining inches on their verticals?
You say what is the best way? Is that the
Yeah.
question? Well,
Yep.
the best way is obviously going to be what's going to work best for you. There's obviously like lots of different periodization models and ways you can go about it. You can even do more than one potentially at a time, but yeah, it's really what's going to work best for you. And we always touch on this in every podcast that everyone's like their own little, unique snowflake, and you have to treat it accordingly. So if you're a slow athlete naturally, like Austin, well, okay, getting a 3 times body weight back squat's probably not going to help him jump higher, right? Whereas someone who's a little bit faster, like naturally, like myself, it's going to translate a lot more. Just getting overall stronger. So there's that, but it's also obviously like a lot more elements and layers to it, which we will dive into later in this podcast.
Well, what's the scientific name for the type of periodization we use? Concurrent
Yeah, concurrent.
periodization. So
Right.
essentially, we're training multiple qualities at the same time. Why does this need to happen? Why can't you just do a strength cycle, a power cycle, and an elastic cycle, for example?
Right. That's not saying that doing that won't work, because I know Jordan's done that in the past, is literally going only strength, only power, only elastic. And it's worked in the past for him. It's also worked for other athletes. So I try not to be absolute in my answers. But generally, yeah, I found that concurrent works better for most people because, you're training every quality at the same time. Now, that doesn't mean, so let's just take the strength, power, and elastic block that we were talking about before. That doesn't mean you do the same volumes and just triple the dose and do all of them all at once. You do different things in different doses. So in some ways you do have like strength specific cycles and power specific cycles, but at the same time, you're not completely forgetting about the other stuff. You're still touching on your elasticity. Say you're doing a power or whatever, and you're still touching on strength. And if you're doing more strength focused one, you're still touching on the other stuff. You're not completely getting rid of it. And the main reason for this is because, like anything, if you don't use it, you lose it. So you don't want to lose the adaptations that you worked so hard for by just completely, going and doing a 180 and doing something completely different.
Yeah. So like in terms of touching on each quality,
Right.
it's okay to like emphasize a certain quality. So if you're going to do strength, power, elastic, you still want to train all the qualities at the same time, but you might just emphasize one more than the other within a certain cycle. Like you never want to like completely remove one quality because then you detrain that quality, you might get stronger, but then say you do less elastic work or not enough to at least maintain it. You might not end up jumping higher at the end of the cycle because your strength goes up, but your elasticity goes down. And then that's how you can end up spinning your wheels and plateauing. So you need to ensure you're training all qualities and at the very least, maintaining the other qualities while you emphasize one more than the other. The other thing is as well, you don't want to be too strict with how you periodize your training. So for example, with strength, power, elastic, you don't want to just do that because you think that's the right thing to do. You got to actually self-assess and be like, hey, what is my weakness right now? Can I squat 2 times my body weight? Oh no, I can't. I probably have a major strength deficit. So I need to focus on strength, not just for one fucking month, for fucking the next 6 months and
6 years,
prioritize that.
bro.
Yeah.
Literally.
Or are you already strong but just slow as fuck like me? Like when I started, cool. So you probably need to jump more and focus more on the elastic side of things, more on the speed side of things for the next fucking year because that stuff takes longer to develop. So you need to also self-assess, and that's where you don't want to be too rigid and too strict on following what the textbooks say and stuff. You need to actually be a little bit flexible. But hey, okay, I've got my squat to 2 times body weight right now, but it's been 3 months. Okay, so what do I need to work on? Oh, my RSI is not where it needs to be. So let's focus on elastic work now. Even though you might have already planned to do 6 months of strength or whatever it is.
You can't be too set in stone, is what you're saying.
You can't be too set in stone because not always things go to plan. The other thing is injuries happen too. That can derail fucking everything.
Or the opposite of what you said happens. Like, say you're like, all right, I'm going to go 3 months all in strength. I'm going to add 20 kilos to my squat and I'm going to stay the same body weight. And get to the end of the 3 months and you've gained weight and your squats stay the same. And you're like, oh shit, haven't made any squat progress. Whether that's a case of maybe you just have to stick with it a little bit longer, or you're programming your squats and strength stuff incorrect, so you didn't progress. That's kind of irrelevant. But the fact is, you have to be flexible and know that you're not going to just be able to move on to a power focus block because you haven't actually done anything in the strength block.
No, for sure. The other thing that's a bit BS is where people will go and program, I'm going to do what is it? They go eccentric. Oh, I'm going to do an eccentric focus phase first. And then I'm going to do an
Right.
isometric focus phase.
What
Then
are
I'm
we
going to
doing?
do
Yeah, what are we doing here?
Then I'm going to do a concentric focus phase. So for anyone that's
Yeah,
listening,
man.
that's all like different components of the stretch shortening cycle. So when you go to jump, you get an eccentric loading phase first, then you get a brief isometric phase, then you get a concentric phase to where you actually propel yourself up. So certain people and programs like to focus on certain aspects at a certain time. That's just completely unnecessary and irrelevant in my opinion. Like, what are your thoughts on that, Tom?
I'm not a fan of it. It sounds fancy, it sounds cool, yeah, like, yeah, I'm gonna do an eccentric focused training cycle, training block, and then I'm gonna switch to isometric. Like, yeah, it just sounds cool, but again, I don't wanna be an absolutist and just give you only absolutes, but this is the closest thing to an absolute no, for me.
Like 99% no.
Yeah, point 0.9.
Yeah, the other caveat too is like you're doing plyometrics, you're already developing all those qualities at the same time. You're gonna get better eccentrically. You're gonna transition from that isometric phase more quickly. You're gonna develop concentric force more quickly. So if you're already doing plyometrics and progressing plyometrics correctly and even strength work as well, like there's no need to isolate those things. You're already getting better at those things. Just doing those simple things.
Bro, I'm just thinking about it more, right? Say you and I go and do this eccentric, isometric, concentric BS. Let's think. You and me would do 2 months of just isometric training. We're just going to go to the gym and we're just going to sit there, do nothing, and just hold the weight. Do you think we're jumping higher at the end of those 2 months, bro? Let me know.
For fuck's sake.
And maybe my tendons will feel really healthy, but I'm for sure not jumping higher.
Yeah, no, for sure, for sure. So, in terms of how to
Oh,
actually
man.
periodize your training correctly, you want to train all qualities at the same time, and whatever you're weak in. So, if you feel like you're slower than most athletes, then you probably need to prioritize that more while still building your strength, while focusing on other things. And if you feel like you're weak, then focus on strength more, and you might need to set a strict timeline in terms of how long you should focus on it, because it's like sometimes it's impossible to know. Sometimes the body's a little bit unpredictable in terms of how it can adapt to trainings. For some people, it might be longer. For some people, it might be shorter. Maybe an injury happens too. So it's good to have a general idea and plan ahead. You absolutely want to do that, but you just don't want to set things in stone, because you just never know what's going to happen and how your body's going to adapt and react to things. You can only predict ahead of time. If you are a little bit confused by everything we're saying and you want help doing this properly and correctly, and you want our help, you can apply for coaching down below if that's something you're interested in. And yeah, we'll jump straight back into the podcast. What other mistakes have you seen people make with periodization, Tom?
Oh, another mistake I've seen with periodization. We haven't really talked about that. People, they read one sports science textbook and they think they know everything about periodization. And they think that if you do not follow the model to a T, you're not going to make progress. Whether that's, a block periodization model or concurrent or whatever. They think if you don't do the right one, and they think that, first of all, they think there's a right answer. They think that there's one that just works, 10 out of 10 times. It's the only one you can do. Not only that, they think that if you don't follow it, you're cooked. But realistically, there's been plenty of people who made progress who haven't followed any model of periodization. They've literally gone out, jumped, gotten stronger. Does that mean go out and just jump and just try and get your squat up? Maybe. You'll probably get better doing that for a while, especially if you're new. But, we're here, Austin and I, Jordan, Brody, we're here to make sure you get the most out of your body, right? So, yeah, we can obviously go and tell you to do that and you might get better, but we're going to make sure and guarantee that you get better because there's going to be alternate ways of doing that depending on the person. Again, use Austin as an example. I said, Austin, just go out there, do a couple jumps per week, like 2 jump sessions, and only work on your squat strength. Realistically, he's not going to jump any higher than he is right now.
The other thing is too, some people like to do is a hypertrophy phase. Now,
That's
the
interesting.
problem, the
Yeah.
problem with that, and the problem with doing an hypertrophy phase. So a typical cycle lasts like what, 4 weeks? 4 weeks is not nearly enough time to develop meaningful hypertrophy in the muscle. develop meaningful
No.
muscle size. You might develop a little bit, but if you really need to bring up a muscle group, then it's better to just through your training train that like constantly, like all year round, or however long you need to bring up that muscle group. So say your quads are lagging, you lack quad strength, it's going to take longer than fucking 4 weeks to develop meaningful muscle size in that area. So you're better off just doing isolation exercises for that year round to emphasize that and bring it up, and just kind of like bleeding it into your training. Or maybe it's your hamstrings, or maybe it's your calves, maybe you have Achilles issues and you need to build up structure around there, or maybe it's knee issues, like I was saying, you need to build up your quads more, your hamstrings more, build up structure around there more. It's better to kind of just uh like bleeding hypertrophy work throughout your training, just through every cycle and however long you need to, or you feel like you need to, other than doing like a strict full-on hypertrophy focused cycle. Because like, what's happened when you've done a full hypertrophy cycle, Tom?
So I've never actually just done a full hypertrophy cycle, first of all. Second of all, bodybuilding as a sport, well, let's look at bodybuilding. I would say in general, it's an older man's sport. I mean, so is powerlifting, to be fair. But it also goes to show that strength and muscle size and developing like, solid muscle bellies takes time. And it's not going to happen in 4 weeks. Day one of the block, you walk, you get out of bed, whatever. You got like flamingo legs, like you're a stick, right? You're not going to do one quad hypertrophy cycle and then look like Chi, jumps by Chi. I don't know if you guys know who he is, but his Instagram's at jumps by Chi. I'd say in the dunk community he's got one of the, I guess, more like larger quad sizes. You're not going to achieve that in 4 weeks. I mean, I don't know how long he's been training for, but I'm sure it took him 2-3 years to go from looking like a skinny kid to having quads how he does. So yeah, you're better off just like slowly bleeding it in over time, because it's going to be a consistency thing. Because even if you chucked all the volume, let's say 4 months worth of hypertrophy volume, and you chucked it all within a month, you're not going to get the same amount of gains in that 1 month just by like, trying to condense the time. Because at the end of the day, your body's only going to grow at a certain rate, unless you're on steroids or whatever. But I'm assuming everyone here is natty. You can only grow so fast. You can only put on so much muscle at a time, Again, trying to put it in that little time period, you're not going to do too much for yourself.
No, for sure, for sure. So we hope this podcast helped you out, and this gave you a lot of clarity behind how you should be periodizing your training, or to put it in more simple terms, structuring your training correctly to jump higher. And if you need help, there's a link down below, and we'll catch you guys in the next episode.